When you first become president, one of the questions that people ask you is, what's really going on at Area 51? I think I just became the first president to ever publicly mention Area 51.
I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world.
I had people go look at the records on Area 51 to make sure there was no alien down there. I had all the Roswell papers reviewed, everything.
If you saw that there were aliens there, would you tell us?
Yeah.
You would?
I mean, if there's some huge national security thing and I can't get agreement to open them, I won't. But I do want to open them because I'm interested.
Do you believe?
I don't know. But there are enough stories out there that I don't think everybody is just sitting, in their kitchen making them up. I think that people see things. What they see, I don't know.
That certain morning, I happened to look over into the sky to the northeast, and I seen a very, very bright light up there, like a very bright star. And then I said, well, that's moving. And I just stood there and watched it as what it was doing, and it was just coming down out of the sky real slow, and no noise, just quiet, and I couldn't see no wings or nothing, just floating right through the midair up there. And I thought, well, if I don't tell nobody that I seen something go over town tonight, nobody will believe me tomorrow.
Hey guys, and welcome to this week's episode of Paranormal Odyssey. Thank you guys so much for taking time out of your schedule to be with us for the show. It is Sunday. I hope you guys have had a great week. We've got an amazing guest lined up for you, but as always, I want to start the show by inviting you. If you've had an encounter and you'd like to be on the show, you can shoot me an email. You can get me at paranormalodysseypodcast@gmail.com. As I said, we've got a great guest lined up for you. We've got my friend and host of Beyond Fringe. We've got Chris Cyrus on the show. Chris has been investigating the paranormal, particularly cryptids, for several years now. And he's here to talk specifically about Dogman. We're going to talk a little bit about Dogman. We're going to talk a little bit about Bigfoot. And it's a pretty fascinating subject all around. You'll notice that in the beginning, Chris's audio is a little suspect, for lack of a better word. We had some audio difficulties, and I had to cut about an hour and a half out of the interview because neither one of us heard the audio issues until it was too late, and we'd already completed most of the interview, and then we corrected them. So I had to piece this together. Chris is going to come back on the show so we can add back the hour plus of conversation that we had that you guys aren't going to hear on this show. But I wanted to go ahead and put the show out because I think it's a great interview. So you guys come back for round 2 with Chris. That said, Chris is on the line. We're going to get started. Bear with me on the audio. Like I said in the beginning, the first few minutes are a little rough, but it definitely improves. So you guys, tonight, it's none other than my friend Chris Cyrus, the host of Beyond Fringe. Welcome to the show, man.
Hey, good evening, Brian. It's a pleasure to be here. How are you this evening?
I am fantastic, man, and I am super excited to talk to you. I'm glad that you're on the show tonight. I had a great time talking to you on your show, and I am glad to return the favor and have you over here, man. I'm looking forward to the wonderful discussion on cryptids tonight.
Oh, it's an honor. Your show was a very successful show. A lot of people liked listening to what you had to say, and I just enjoyed what you had to say personally. A lot of the things that you talked about when it came to Bigfoot and Dogman, period, were some of the most interesting topic discussion I've had with somebody. And I like your brand. I like your channel. I just wanted to say this also on air. Personally, as somebody who started doing podcasting for this really full time back in 2018, and I like what you're doing. You're very informative. You ask very good questions, and your guests are great. And I want you to keep going. I'm very proud of you, friend. You're doing a phenomenal job. Keep up the hard work.
Awesome. I appreciate it. Now I hope I don't screw this up tonight. That's going to be big shoes to fill.
I don't think so. I don't think that would be the case, my friend. Especially with what we got to talk about today. There's some interesting things, Bigfoot, Dogman related, and I think your listeners would love to hear it.
Yeah, let's get right into it, man. I want to talk about Dogman. I know that Dogman has sort of been your wheelhouse since you started down this cryptid path. So let's walk into and go into some of the more interesting encounters that you've documented and maybe you've had on your show or that you're aware of about Dogman.
array of reports that I've collected, they differ from between being very frightening to kind of unknown speculation. Another report I collected from an individual was from a Christian man in PA who was traveling along one of the parks with his friend, his brother, and they had noticed across this river this giant black creature that was about 50 feet away, but it looked at them and it was just observing them. This is a Christian man who was certain that this thing wasn't out to kill him and that was just curious of him. A lot of people with religion have often described Dogman as a demon, have often described it as something as like a very evil creature. I disagree with that because, one, I feel that we're dealing with something that is natural, and if it is a supernatural being, then it's not a Dogman, it's a werewolf or something else, whatever you would want to name it. But I feel that we bring religion into a lot of things that unfortunately do not conspire with what we're trying to find here. You mentioned that you're skeptical of Dogman, but if someone of religious faith can tell you, hey, Dogman is there as a demon, that makes me wonder. It's like, well, if that's the case, then is maybe, I don't know, are bears demons for killing livestock or attacking people when it's a natural thing they do? Or when a wild gorilla can rip someone to shreds for challenging them when it beats their chest, is it a demon? I don't think so. So I feel that with a lot of people who see these things and they're of the religious faith, that they look of what they hear about in the Bible and they compare it to that and they unfortunately contradict. I don't think that's the right way to go about things, because I feel when studying these things scientifically, I feel that we should really open all the doors, but all at the same time, we have to present facts to clarify things. We have a lot of facts being presented for flesh and blood, which make me leer towards it. When we have people that represent other pieces of information that are unfortunately not as valid as I think they are, because they don't, in order to convince someone of a Dogman, it could be like a demon, whether it's like, or a portal, you would have to describe in good detail why. I mentioned about a paranormal side to them that could be, whether it's infrasound or them vanishing out of the sight, or because they're very quiet. I mean, it's a predator. I feel a predator of its own sense would be quiet. No, its stealth routes very well. Walk around and hear movement behind you, but when you stop, it stops. A very tactical move of a predator to note that you're being followed, but you don't know where it's coming from. So, I mean, I feel that people really dive into this whole thing a little bit too far, where we have religious views interact with the demons, or with Dogmen, which makes them think they're demons, which makes them think otherwise. So to hear a report from a Christian man who had very much so didn't think it was a demon, and just thought it was a natural creature, which is just abnormal, was very thorough, and I liked it. I had another man of a Christian faith who had a ranch. He was living with his father, and I talked about this report last week on another podcast, and he was divorced at the time, and he was living with his dad, who was older and was a little ill, and he needed some help around the house. And this gentleman was at his dad's ranch for a little bit, and this was in Arizona. This was in Colorado. He was there, and one night in the guest bedroom was hearing noises from outside, but he couldn't see or anything what was going on. And then he began to notice a small pattern where, livestock like chickens on this farm, cattle were getting nervous and getting scared. Literally was a bug to him. And his dad didn't think anything of it. He couldn't hear a thing. So one night he goes out there with a gun after hearing the noises again, because he thinks it's a predator going to take the livestock. At this point in time, there were some chickens that had gone missing, but there weren't anything else further. Ultimately, this guy noticed something coming from the wood line, and it had amber eye shine, and it was big, and it was about 100 feet away from him. And he didn't put his gun at it. He didn't aim at it, because this creature wasn't coming at him. It was just walking towards him, but didn't show any signs of intimidation. Guy thoroughly said that he wants it off its property and to be left alone, that he isn't here to attack it, but to leave him and his father alone. And he had said a small prayer of positivity, and this thing left. But it didn't bother him, didn't do anything, and the activity stopped. At the time of this encounter, though, this was years ago, so he's changed. That things are different for him now, but he remembered when that happened. It looked like as if the creature was impressed with the fact that it didn't come at him with a gun like most people would, as if this isn't the first time this Dogman creature had encountered a human being aiming a gun at it. So I think that because this guy respected and was positive about, hey, I'll kill you if you do this again, versus, and instead used different ways of approach, it backed off. So that was another interesting report that I had collected from an individual. I'll break it down to about maybe a couple more reports and go from there. Another case I collected was in Pennsylvania again, this time in a small trailer community with a lot of people who all know each other. And in this mobile home community, there was a lot of occurrences where people were seeing Dogman that was running across the yards, and that there were people who were finding wild turkeys that were being killed. Pets like cats and strays in the area were being stolen and missing. And one night, a bunch of people in the park decided to band together and say, hey, let's try to find this thing. What's taking this and that? They went to the woods with a small manhunt, and in particular, they divided themselves into 4 different groups. And one particular group went north of the park, of the trailer mobile homes, and they caught footprints, they caught hair, and they saw a bit of blood. And they described, this was a group of 6, they had seen a giant creature running in the distance when they aimed their flashlight at it, and this thing was running away from them. But they caught a glimpse of something very large running with fur and having pointy ears. And they were freaked out by it because they said that must be the thing that's taking all of our animals away and causing all this chaos at night running across the yard. Next morning, they call security because there's actually a security base that's right around the area, a security agency, sorry. And they described that, they would want protection. They could tell management about it. And management mentioned to some of the locals about how this guy was coming in one morning and he had seen something staring at him right across in the wood line right by a house, and it looked like a werewolf. And he was very freaked out by it. So the fact that other people were seeing things freaked him out even more because he had wished he came forward with it sooner. So anyways, security, these people were out for a little bit, but then the security agency revoked their contract and said, listen, we don't want to come around your area, after they had a couple people go out a couple nights and they just rejected it. So there was a little bit of conspiracy there. I assume, and under my interpretation of it, I believe that one of these security watchmen saw it. They were bugged by it. They told the rest of the staff, and that's when they came and told the head of the chief, the director of it, and they revoked it. And I think that's what happened. One other encounter I can share with you was one that hit close to home. There was a guy I knew who's now in Kansas who, when in 2016 with his one buddy, were camping in the Pine Barrens towards the Wharton State Forest, and they had seen a creature about a little north of them. And the story goes is that this individual was camping, and they were by the Wharton State Forest. See, the thing is with the Pine Barrens is it's 1.1 million acres. There's so much land that covers between New Jersey, PA, and New York. It's mostly New Jersey, though. It covers all these areas, all around the state of New Jersey. It's large, and there are reports of cults, reports of strange people in the woods, people living in the woods. People have reported skinwalkers, Bigfoot, ghosts and paranormal, abandoned structures, and just weird things. So where they were camping by the Wharton State Forest area, which expands upon southern Jersey. And they were camping, just were chilling by the campfire, and this was in November 2016. They go ahead and they hear a noise behind them, and they go ahead and they proceed to walk towards that noise. when they get around to that noise, they have the lantern, they have a flashlight, they glimpse of something. And much like, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, when Leatherface pops out in that one scene, the light shines on this giant hominid that has a little bit of blood in its mouth and its teeth out, and amber eyes shine, looking right at these two. And they bolt it. They run. They take a few belongings, and they get in their pickup, and they just bolt out of there. They didn't care if they left, additional things behind, because they were that petrified. And the description of it was as best as my friend. He described it as being 9 feet tall and looking like the beast of LBL, the sketch that was done of it, with just pointier ears and longer yellow teeth. So that was a very freaky experience for him and his friend. And it's because of that experience that he broke down in tears talking about it. He was so petrified of it that he had no idea what he was talking about. He didn't even know what the hell he had seen. Trying to go back to that location was hard for him because he still felt that the presence there. But I can guarantee that's probably one out of almost 1 million encounters that have been documented in the Pine Barrens. So that's basically a rap sheet, a list of majority of the encounters that I had. I could share more, but a lot of these encounters, as I said, once you hear one, you hear them all. But there's just so much ground, and to build a connection to it, you got people who've seen things in all the parks I've collected in the state of New Jersey, north and south. There are glimpses of reports of people who've seen these things. And you also got those who see things in other states. So the frequency of dogmen roaming around the woods is very random. It's interesting what you can find out of it, because people will swear that they've seen this or that, or that it's a totally different being, or that it's, a Bigfoot. So the Dogman creature and some of those reports are just very unique, but they also come with some questions, especially when it looms towards just the behavior of the creature. Majority of the reports I collect are people who've often shared with them with permission. They often think that this thing lets them live. They think that if this thing wanted to kill them, it would. But it let them live because it didn't showcase that it was going to do anything that would harm them, but it didn't want the human to see it, which caused it to go after them, which some people have thought as to be fact, as 100%, because why else would this thing chase you out of the woods if it's not going to kill you? But there are people that do strike their post with it, and they do want to try to attack it if it tries to attack them. Do I believe in self-defense for this thing? Absolutely. But I will not go out there and kill one for science, because I feel that this thing is going to come back with me like Bigfoot clans. They're going to go ahead and they're going to revenge their fallen. I think people don't see that a lot because they kind of look at movies and they think, could that happen with Bigfoot's going to happen with Dogman? But it does. I've heard people, like in that one case with the woman with the teeth. This Dogman, obviously must have been a fallen dead Dogman's teeth, because this creature wanted it back. Why else would it want it back? That's basically the gist of the stories that I've shared. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask.
Yeah, I have tons and tons and tons of questions. And I guess I'll start with this. I do come at this from a very skeptical point of view, as skeptical as I can be, because I'm skeptical of Bigfoot, right? I've went on the record many times on my other show and said I believe that these things are real. I believe that they exist. I believe that I've had personal experiences with these things, although I haven't seen it. But I question myself, right? Could it be something else? Could those vocalizations have been something else? Could something else have paced me out of the woods? And I ask those questions. The same thing happens with Dogman. I mean, I guess with Bigfoot, I'm able to say, hey, this could be a relict hominoid. This could be something that existed alongside us somewhere back in history. All these things that I can draw correlations to that make it easier for me, and frankly, I think everybody, to digest. But when you start talking about a 6, 7, 8 foot creature that apparently half man, half dog, I don't know what box to check, right? So I don't doubt those stories. I don't doubt those people's experiences, but it's very difficult for me and everybody probably listening to wrap their brains around. So I guess I'll start here with you. Do you think these things are flesh and blood, or do you believe that there's some sort of a paranormal aspect to these things, or could it be a combination of both?
In some of my recent months now, speaking to some folk who have gone out there investigating Dogman, they describe how this thing, well, they're flesh and blood enthusiasts. They're also very leery of the fact that this thing could be paranormal because of the way it acts, the way it goes about a certain scenario. You take, for example, somebody who is seeing this thing from a far distance, and the atmosphere around them, things just seem a little off. They feel like something's messing with them. Could this be a creature with infrasound that's just, playing games with them? Could it be their fear? Their fear. Anybody that goes in the woods, or anybody who's not a real big outdoors person, will always have a fear of being watched, because that's the woods for you. You're in animals' territory where it's their area. They know all the barks, you don't. And for Dogman to be flesh and blood, I feel that what people are saying, all the reports I talked about here tonight, I feel that they are flesh and blood reports. But I also feel that there is a bit of paranormal to them. I feel that they can do things paranormal-wise, whether it's the infrasound effect or them having a heavy intelligence that could be going off as paranormal, but I think not many people are talking about it. There's not enough information, and that's why I think people go with paranormal, because it's easier to go into a realm of discussing magic, because it's easy to incorporate magic into anything. You could take the most realistic situation and incorporate magic into it. And I mean by magic, I mean by like portals. I mean by, zapping things creatures can do, like reportedly the zap effect, and also just the grim nature these things possess. Well, that goes back to a discussion of, like, do I think bears would be demons then if they attacked a person, or if they just killed livestock the way they normally do? Is it a very shameful sight? Yeah. But that's nature. Now, them being flesh and blood, Dogman, I've people who've shot at one, if it bled, that infamous quote from Predator, if it bleeds, we can kill it. If this thing is bleeding and it's supposed to be supernatural, I don't think it'd be leaving a trail that it would have attraction to it. I also think that this thing probably is a flesh and blood animal because of the sole nature that this creature has killed livestock, has eaten livestock, has eaten roadkill before, has attacked a human being, slashed them, but hasn't, it's not like this thing is supernatural where if it bleeds acid and it can burn you. And someone's been cut by this thing that obviously it felt like it was like being stabbed a heavy gash in you with a sharp knife. And I don't think these things would do that if they were supernatural. So I think they're flesh and blood. It's hard to really describe. I feel that in order for you to really buy into the flesh and blood aspect, you got to sit down. You got to not just listen to podcasts. You got to go out there and research it. You got to go into a territory where there is Dogman and determine that factor. You got people who will swear that they're demonic because of some of the reports they've heard about, but you hear those reports. Unless you have an experience and you go out there and you say that this thing does somersaults and it goes through a portal and comes out like Pennywise from It, then I feel that that's where you'll see the difference of supernatural. But if it is supernatural, then I think we're dealing with something here that's not a Dogman. I think that that's a werewolf, and not the werewolf mythology that we knew about in Hollywood. I'm talking about not just European werewolf mythology. I'm talking about modernism mythology. The idea that a werewolf, if a man was transformed into a wolf all night with a full moon, then why do we see these things during the day? Could a werewolf be seen during the day? I think so. But I think that we got to take out that supernatural element we learned in fiction about werewolves and incorporate it as a realistic approach, meaning that you have to look at the supernatural side of what a werewolf is with an open mindset that's realistic, and not just one that is incorporating all the sorts of magic into it that make it out to be a freaking attraction, a circus act. So, and I also mentioned too about how these things could be spotted and they maybe could be a shapeshifter. Hell, maybe a shapeshifter could even be a werewolf, and what we're seeing out there is a shapeshifter. We may or may not know that, but hey, listen, there's a possibility. And there's a possibility because anybody out there can shapeshift in something if they've studied the magic right. You can only shapeshift if you study dark magic. So ultimately, I feel that if that is the case, that this could be all the work of a shaman who could be in the form of a werewolf and could do the things it does. But that's a heavy bridge to explore without a lot of answers. I feel the only way to get a good answer on it is if someone's experienced it, or someone out there who is researching has a good idea on the area and site of this creature and can provide a PowerPoint professionally with a good explanation towards it that would be beneficial, not just for the flesh and blood enthusiast, but for everybody.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that's why we're doing this show now, because we're looking for those answers. And I certainly appreciate your answers to the questions that I asked, but I find myself going back and forth. Let's go back to the Bigfoot thing, right? I do the Bigfoot show, and that's sort of my forte. I guess you'd call it my day job, right? But, I go back and forth because I think I take a lot of encounters that people believe now. In hindsight, a lot of the times, I see like the evidence presented, right? I see people posting pictures and things online of what they say they've seen, and it's pareidolia, right? There's nothing there. It brings me to a question, are some of these reports that we hear and we take, could they be misidentifications? I mean, what do you think the amount of reports like Bigfoot, Dogman? You said there are hundreds, maybe even thousands of Dogman reports throughout history. How many of them do you think may be misidentifications, or do you think all of these people are seeing a similar creature?
It's a very good question too, because the thing about misidentification is that people can interpret that it's this, but anybody can say it's that, which causes misinterpretation to become a spiderweb effect. You described in some cases where people are sitting there, I don't know, I guess like people who describe like in bear cases, right? Bears are very they're large, and people will be certain that, okay, it's a large predator, but hey, it also could be maybe perhaps a bison or of that nature. As ridiculous as that sounds, some people actually have said that. And with misidentifications, I think that if it is maybe all general a Bigfoot, that it definitely has all the attributes of a Bigfoot. It has very similar scenario, very similar way of behavior, but it's, I feel, more vocal, not talkative, but vocal as in approach and how it does things body language wise. Now, physically, has Dogman attacked a person? There have been some reports. However, there have also been reports on people who have described these things and have made clearance of the fact that it just looks like a large animal, like a large dog that is just looking at you, and it's intimidating. It looks like a dog that has not bathed, has not been groomed, and it just looks friggin' mad. And to misidentify something like that is very different. And I think people have misidentified things in the past. Maybe people have misidentified Bigfoots in the past with Dogman encounters, and people have misidentified Dogman with Bigfoot in some regions. If there's a Bigfoot dominant region and people are describing Dogman, I highly don't believe it's Dogman there. I think it's Bigfoot. And if people are seeing Bigfoot in Dogman big regions, then it's probably just a Dogman, because there are variants where people have said it does look like a Bigfoot with a snout. So there's also reports of that. I think what people are seeing out there are two similar creatures, but it's not necessarily the same thing. And I think you're also dealing with two research camps that are still trying to determine what's right and what's wrong. And another good example of that as well is when people are spotting this lizard man that's been around for ages, and now the new trend is now the gator man, which makes me feel it's a joke, like Fox Man, like Panda Man, and my personal favorite, the best one of them all, I would have to say, is the Aardvark Man. And that really gives you a staple on why people would be skeptical of Dogman, right? Because of the hilarity that I'm not laughing at. That showcases that people who seen these things that swear to God that these things were real, but then you got jokers that make up names like Gatorman and Foxman to make a good story for a buck. because, hey, look, if they can hustle for it, why not? And that's the big issue, I think, with some people here. The Dogman misidentifications, and maybe it's not a Dogman, maybe it's just a Bigfoot. I think people just don't really understand that there are two different creatures there. But I think people see the comparison and similarities in both of them, which is why we can try to make off to one. Or there's those people out there, not saying you, but those people who don't want to take the nature that Bigfoot's not the only creature out there and just want to say it's all Bigfoot, because Bigfoot's been in charge of the woods for years. So, misidentification-wise, I think so.
There are probably, like you said, Bigfoot encounters that I hear that seem sort of dog-like and vice versa. And I think that there's a lot of misidentifications that happen. I mean, we misidentify things all the time. You know, that you see those pictures online all the time. It's this big hairy poodle coming out of a woods, and people post it because it looks like a Bigfoot. I mean, I've seen that and I looked at it the first time. I was like, holy shit, that's a Bigfoot. Wait, it's a poodle. You know, the eyes play tricks on us. And in high stress situations, I think it's very easy to misidentify. Either way, you're looking at something that's not supposed to exist. And whether it's a Dogman or a Bigfoot, you've hit the cryptid lottery because you've seen something that's not supposed to be there. So, and there are tons of different cryptids out there. And I think that's why people, similar to what you were talking about, I think it makes it a lot simpler for people to dismiss everything because of some of the crazy things that people come up with that clearly don't exist. And it makes it easy for them to say, well, you know, if Aardvark Man doesn't exist, then certainly Bigfoot doesn't exist, and neither does Dogman. And I think that's sad, because there are a lot of people out there who have had genuine encounters, like Christine Ann, who I've had on this show. I believe that she's had these encounters. I believe that she's seen what she says she saw. And there's tons of people who don't believe her. And a lot of those people are people who believe that there's a 9-foot, 1,200-pound ape running around in the woods of North Carolina.
Right.
But they think Dogman is a ridiculous, notion that could be real. And I just think that's kind of crazy.
It is. And I will say this. I've heard cases of people who described like Bigfoot as 16 feet tall. And then at that point, this creature is big enough to be as tall as the forest that it's inhabiting. And to me, I feel anybody could see it. And that causes a rift. I feel that people in general are that's when you can tell who is making something up and who is trying to be genuine. Do I think that these creatures are as giant as 10 feet tall? I think that would be the biggest in height. I think the most we're looking at is at least 7 feet tall, 8 feet tall, the most. I don't think anything bigger than that. There's a video of a guy from the 1900s in the 20th century who was a tall man. He died at a young age because of his growth, and he was as tall as Andre the Giant. And it's incredible because this guy literally fits the description of a Bigfoot, how tall they are. But I think people exaggerate height because they want to post the creature as intimidating.
I agree, and that's a very good point, because most people don't realize the bone structure in a body that size, what toll it takes, number one, on the skeletal system, and two, that once you get to a certain height, the body starts collapsing in on itself. The knock-kneed walk and those things that happen, I don't think that Bigfoot, being a possible relict hominoid, would be exempt from that, right? I think that would weigh on them as well. I'm sure there's adaptations and things that have happened over the years to take care of and make up for the size difference. But like you said, when you talk 10, 12, 14, 16 feet tall, that's a little bit out there for even me, to accept. So I do believe there's a lot of that goes around. Like you said, they're trying to convey the size because it probably seemed to them that it was 16 feet tall, even though it might have only been 7 feet tall.
No, and that's another thing too. I've had witnesses describe to me heights that when I compare it to the biggest NBA players, like Shaquille O'Neal, for example, right? Shaquille O'Neal, back when he was doing the NBA, he was very tall, very huge guy. And as we get older, our growth, it either shrinks or it deteriorates. And I would assume that when we look at the height of Shaquille O'Neal, we see a Bigfoot, but we also see a Dogman height in comparison. But realistically, too, I mean, with Shaq's height back then, going into the 7 feet range, I mean, that's about as close as you get to a Bigfoot report. And I think people, when they speak to me, they realize that I'm very serious when they want to BS a report, because I have called people out for being wrong. I'm not going to give out full specs, but I've not interviewed anybody, and I declined to interview somebody who was going to explain to me about him being a werewolf and that he grows to at least 11 feet tall. And I got a few of those before, and I just declined them, because to me, that's somebody who's trying to get some exposure. And I feel when those people who exaggerate stories are doing exposure because they want people to listen to them, because they don't have nothing else going for them.
Yeah, I've definitely dealt with that myself on both shows so far, so I certainly get that. Chris, it's been fascinating stuff, man. I can't thank you enough for coming on and sort of breaking down the Dogman Enigma for us.
Absolutely.
It's been fascinating, man. I learn something every time I talk to you. I can't thank you enough for your time.
Hey, I'm always out and about. Brian, I'd love to speak to you again as well, always, because you have a great mindset, and I love your presentation. It's an honor.
Awesome, man. The pleasure and the honor was mine. I appreciate it very much.
Absolutely, my friend.
And that's it for tonight's show, folks. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll see you guys next week.